we'll introduce ourselves going down the line. So I'm Caroline Simcox. I'm, I guess, just a general fan of Supergirl. I've done some writing, I've written some Doctor Who audio plays and that kind of thing. So I guess I bring a little bit of a writer's perspective to it, but largely a fan rather than anything else. Shall we go down the line and say who we are and what our interest is?
Hi everybody, I'm Kevin. Lifelong comic books fan, DC Comics fan, and these days I produce and co-host a podcast called The Flopcast, based out of Boston, and it's a very silly, very geeky show where we talk about 70s, 80s pop culture and up through the superhero shows of today, like we're going to talk about here.
I'm Anne. I come to this much more recently than sounds like Kevin does. I started watching the CW superhero shows and then started watching Supergirl when it came on last fall, and pretty much that was my first introduction to the character.
Hi, I'm Coven Synopathy, and I also am far newer to this than Kevin. I'm not very familiar with the DC universe at all, so I'm also a big fan, and watched all the episodes as they came out. And yeah, so that's why I'm here.
And I'm Dana Baird, and an author and an artist and a costumer. So I grew up on DC and the Super Friends and all of that, and then returned to the household of DC for a costume project right around the time Supergirl came out. So I thought, well, that's kismet, and this needs to be watched now. And then, of course, the show came on, and I just had to watch all the things because it's such a wonderful show. So yeah, and I was interested in this partly as an author of female characters, and I love seeing a show that had that kind of diversity. So I'm all about it.
So obviously we do have some minors in the room, so although on other panels we can be a bit freer with our language, this evening we'll need to watch our P's and Q's a little bit, so I'll just remind my fellow panel members of that. We're going to start, I thought, because this is a fan panel, we'll start with pure squee, and then we can move on to a little bit more in-depth stuff. So I'd like to ask my fellow panelists, who is your favourite character, and why?
Oh no, we're starting with me?
No, you can start with whoever you like. You have a button to say.
I can go. We can start on this end. We'll just
Okay.
start our back and
Love
forth
that
here.
idea.
Yeah, I have no trouble squeeing all over David Harewood and John Jones. By far my favorite character. And the reason why I love it, it's interesting that I'm like Miss Feminist, but a guy is my favorite character. But I like it because he actually defied expectations, and that's one of the things. And David Harewood is just so unbelievably talented that, I mean, you cannot bring that kind of awesome to a role without turning it into an awesome role. So I was so prepared to hate this character. When we first got introduced to him, I was just like, oh my God, oh, what a mob. And then he just became this really, really unbelievably awesome person, and I loved that character arc. So that's why he's my favorite, and of course Supergirl just rocks anyway, as expected. So, yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'll also add a different reason, I guess, for why John Jones is my favorite character right now. I did hate him for a while there, but I think just the fact that he's a father and a family man who lost his entire family in such a tragic and violent way, and yet is still able to embrace and have powerful relationships and view these girls, Kara and Alex, as his own daughters almost, is very moving to me. I guess I'm just that sappy one. I tear up a little bit during some of those scenes. So John Jones is also my favorite, and then I guess since that was Dana's favorite, I'll add kind of the expected one. Cat Grant is also my kind of, John Jones is my favorite for being that interesting kind of father character, but Cat Grant has gone from seemingly a two-dimensional kind of cheerleader, old school feminist, not too deep, to being really complex and having a lot of interesting perspectives and advice, and of course being this sort of matriarch and powerful woman is just very interesting and exciting to me.
And I agree with Grant being my favorite, I'll say I started off the first episode not caring for her at all. And I grew through the season to watch her teach so much to Kara and Supergirl, but also clearly learn from the goodness that's in Supergirl and that ideal. To watch her change over the season, I thought was a great evolution for the character.
Yeah, Kat was a tricky one. I mean, that was my biggest problem with the show when it first started was Kat Grant. I thought, oh, she is way over the top. I thought she was such a crazy caricature of like the evil boss. And I came to like her a lot more over the course of the season. And I don't know if that was me coming around to her or if that was the character or the actor evolving along the way, or a combination of those three. But yeah, I was a lot more on board with Kat by the end. As far as my favorites, I'll say Kara. I'll go with the easy, obvious one. Although what the answer I would have liked to have given, and we just haven't seen enough of them yet, but I would love to see a lot more, hopefully, in the next season, of Helen Slater and Dean Cain.
Yeah. Interesting. I'm a bit of a Cat fan too, but I think my favourite's probably Alex. I just love that big sister role and the relationship between the two sisters. And you can see that she's not perfect, she's flawed, she makes mistakes, but there's always this strength at the core of it. And my favourite moment is, I can't think which episode it is. It's after Supergirl discovers, Alex tells Kara that she was the one who killed Astro. And you think Kara's going to walk out of the room and nothing's going to happen, and Alex is just bereft and she stood there, and that moment of hug where the two just come together and Alex just lets go and Kara holds her, and it's just the most perfect summary of the relationships in the show. Just wonderful, wonderful family love.
I'd actually like to add to that, 'cause that was one of my favorite scenes too. It sticks, that final shot sticks in my head because of their embrace, and also Kara grabbing John Jones' hand. And so you've got the two sisters connected, you've got her holding him and he's kind of off to the side. There's kind of this avuncular moment that he's part of it, but he also does not infringe upon the solidity of their moment together. You know, that he definitely has to be included in that, but not in the full hug. So I was kind of glad they didn't do, group hug moment. You know, it was kind of poignant. He's still over here. It's still them that's really important, and it was told beautifully in this wonderful frame. Which I thought was really awesome.
Cool. So in the description of the panel, it mentions about how the show riffs off the existent DC universe. So I just wanted to get us talking about how it fits in with the current stable of DCU shows and where we think its place is now and perhaps going forwards, now that we know we've got the move to the CW. So whoever wants to go first.
Is everyone else following all these other DC shows? 'Cause
I am not, but the
Yeah.
crossover with Flash makes me want to go back and re-watch those CW shows. Yeah. I'm like, okay, now I'm curious.
They're very different. I mean, there's 4 shows now that are connected. Like there's 5 if you count Constantine, on a technicality. But Arrow was the first of this batch of shows, and Arrow is very dark compared to the rest of them. And then the Flash added much more of an element of fun, and things are a little brighter. And hey, sometimes the sun comes out in Central City as opposed to Star City or Starling City. Supergirl now, even more so. Now it's big, open up skies because we have superheroes flying around in the sky, and it's beautiful, and it's such a feeling of hope in this series, and people smile in National City on occasion as they don't elsewhere in the DC universe. So I love how they're all different. They all have their own tone. Legends of Tomorrow, obviously, they're just out playing Doctor Who, right? So they're all doing their own thing, but they all connect. Right? And it was so clever, I thought, the Flash crossover, which was so much fun, but it was a parallel universe. We learned that Supergirl is in a different universe than those other series. Now, if you were watching The Flash over this past season, we learned all about parallel universes because Flash is hopping over to Earth 2, and there's Earth 1 and Earth 2, and all these crazy multiple Earth concepts from DC Comics history, which as an old school fan like me, and probably Dana as well, just your head explodes over it. I
Yeah.
never thought you'd see this on, they didn't do this on the Super Friends.
Well, I love how they justify it that way. 'Cause I was aware of, when I saw the episode, I was like, oh, they're doing it that way. Because there are so many conflicting storylines of,
Yeah.
you know, who does what, when, and how, and where.
Well, it wouldn't make any
Yeah.
sense for Superman to exist in the universe of Arrow and Flash, because
Yeah.
how come no one's ever mentioned Superman?
Yeah.
Right, so that's the
exactly.
answer is it's a parallel universe. And then Flash, even for people who only watched Supergirl and didn't know anything about this stuff, on the Flash episode, he gave like a quick crash course in parallel universes
Yeah,
to kind
in
of explain
Supergirl
that to the
episode,
Supergirl
yeah.
audience, which was nice.
So Anne, you mentioned that you got into it through other
Yeah.
DCU shows.
And I agree that the tone in all of them is so different, that Arrow is so dark, Flash is so much fun, Supergirl, probably the most optimistic of them. But I also feel like they all follow a theme of family through them, and how the superheroes interact with family and how they depend on family, that I feel like it's a different tone, but it is still some of the same themes, and I like seeing that expressed in the different ways.
Kevin, what do you think?
I can't really speak to this one because I'm not super familiar with the DC universe, but I really liked that Flash episode. I mean, I was able to, as someone who doesn't follow the DC universe, I was able to follow that very well. So, and that was a fun episode. So.
Do you think you want to watch the rest?
Yeah, I did. I haven't yet.
Did it make you want to have someone bring you ice cream really fast?
That's always true.
All right, so beforehand, I collected some questions from folk, and one of the ones that came up from Anne was about Maxwell Lord, who is, of course, a kind of on-again, off-again villain throughout the series. So I wonder if I can ask you guys, I'll ask you Anne's question. Maxwell Lord, is he a friend, a foe, or a pot stirrer? What do we think? Pot stirrer.
I think he's been all three, but I don't trust him one bit. I think he's a foe and a pot stirrer.
Right, short answer.
I think he is whatever he thinks he needs to be at the time to accomplish what he thinks needs to be accomplished at the time. So whether that's, I need to serve my own self-interest, then that's what he's gonna do. I need to save the world because, you know, again, it's in my self-interest to save the world, that's what he'll do. So he's kind of a cat. And, you know, he basically does what he wants to do, and if the rest of the humans want to follow along, then that's what he'll do, you know, and he'll turn on you, you know, oh yeah, rub my tummy, you know. He's a cat.
I mean, the easy answer would be to say, okay, he's the villain, he's the Lex Luthor, he's going to be the bad guy. And at sometimes he may be that, and people who know DC Comics know a little bit more about Maxwell Lord, Max Lord is a character out of the comics who was used in different ways. He was like an agent for the Justice League at some point and then betrayed them or something.
He started the
It's
Justice
crazy and
League.
complicated, as all things do. And but straightforward, just I'm evil, I'm a villain, that's boring. You know, he doesn't always have to be evil. And to have a more complex character that sometimes you're going to like what he does, and because people aren't 100% evil or 100% good in reality. So I like that it's a complex character and it's hard to figure out.
Cool. And Anne?
I guess I agree with all of what's been said. I feel like in several cases we saw him create problems and then step in and solve them. So I also thought there was something about just wanting to be in the spotlight. I'm going to come in and I'm going to create this thing that, and oh look, I'm the only one who can fix it. Was what made it more of a complex thing, and at least he did in some cases come up and, oh yeah, this is my bad, so let me help you out here.
I should add, unless you're finished.
No, go.
Sometimes it's interesting to see the conflict or almost a contest between who can control the media more, him or Kat.
Okay, that moves us on to a really interesting thing in the series. Obviously, these days, media is very, very powerful. It influences everything that we do. What do we think about the theme of media that runs through Supergirl, about the use of it, about the abuse of it, and how it can be used?
I I think like any good mythology, it's a reflection of its time and culture. You know, the classic Super Friends was, you know, fit its time and it's within its themes, and this one now, it's got that new sensibility, you know, that Batman did the Bat Tuesday, and, you know, that's what you did in the 60s, and now, you know, Supergirl broadcasts, you know, on wideband, you know, on whatever you call it, you know, in Wi-Fi to get her message across.
And we also have Kat saying, I named her, I branded her, she's mine. Trying to accept that trademark and that ownership.
Yeah.
Using media influence.
The media is a huge part of this story. I mean, and historically, it always has been. You're thinking Clark Kent worked at a newspaper, you know, from 1938, and through the years, you know, media has always reflected the superheroes. But I like how it's a major part of the story. Is how is the world interpreting what Supergirl's doing based on what they're being fed by Cat Grant or by the media in general. The media, to some extent, created Supergirl in this world, so it's a massive part of the story.
It's interesting to see the back and forth between Kat and Kara/Supergirl. Like Anne said, Kat named Supergirl, so and she wanted to lay claim to her. And Supergirl, or Kara in the beginning, if you remember, tells Kat that that's not a good name for Supergirl, but she eventually accepts it because I think she realizes that that kind of endearing image that Kat's putting out there of Supergirl might be to her benefit. But then, as the series continues, there's this back and forth between how much Kara will accept of what Kat wants to make of her, and even what James, Catco, and the media in general wants to make of her, and how much she allows it and gives in, and how much she defies that image.
It's I find it very interesting the balance of power within the show, the power that lies with different characters. So very often Kat self-proclaims herself as the most powerful person because she's got the control over the media. And of course in the episode where Supergirl is affected by the red kryptonite, we have that moment on the top of the building, don't we, when she says, well, let me show you what true power is, and drops her off. And just that moment, but you see it throughout the series, in fact, I think, the power differential between Kara and Kat. Kara can lift spaceships, you know, she can fly, she can do this stuff, and she is terrified of Kat. You see her body language when she comes into a room with Kat and Kat makes a sudden move and she's like, she looks like she's terrified she's going to be jumped on any second. She's genuinely afraid of her, of the power that she holds, even though in herself she's got plenty of her own. What do we think about the power relationships in the show?
Well, that's interesting that you bring that up, Carolyn, because when you think about how the classic, you know, Christopher Reeve or the Clark Kent interpretations over the years, the bumbling Clark Kent, and it was an act. Everybody knew. You see confused, awkward Clark Kent, and you know, oh, that's Superman. He's pretending that he's like this to fool everybody. And we see Kara trying to deliver a coffee order, and she's terrified. And it doesn't seem like it's completely an act anymore, with the way we've seen that before. So yeah, it is interesting that she's Supergirl. You know, that's super crazy powerful, but she can also just be brought down at a human level.
I guess I sort of saw it more as the Clark Kent. Kara's behavior is more of the Clark Kent, though, because she definitely looks more nervous when she has on her glasses and she's in street clothes. And then she's got a lot more confidence in her Supergirl outfit. So I wondered if some of the scare was an act, too.
Yeah, I think the Supergirl, I mean, the whole look itself gives her confidence, but the moment to me that was most interesting is when Kat said that she knew that Kara was Supergirl and that she was demanding evidence to the contrary. And I mean, that was the epitome of that demonstration of the power that Kat has over Kara and over Supergirl. And it was almost moving to see see how desperate Kara felt to remain at the job, and maybe even more than remaining at the job, she wanted to continue and keep that relationship going with Kat. And we were talking about this earlier, but how they resolved that was, I mean, I didn't see it coming. I don't know if all of you expected it to be resolved that way, but it was just very interesting.
Well, I think that, yeah, I mean, and the jury's out on whether Kat bought it or not.
Yeah.
I think that Kat didn't, personally. I think that Kat I think Kat has decided to go with plausible deniability. And because I feel like Kat, for all of her faults and being so as unlikable as she was, she is kind of Kara's moral compass to a degree. And you know, for me, it didn't occur to me until the moment Kat said it, it's like, if you are in fact Supergirl, you should not be wasting time when you could be out saving people, bringing me coffee, and I'm gonna have to fire you. And I was just like, gosh, she's right. I mean, how unbelievably selfish is Kara wanting this normal life when she really should just be spending all of her days running around rescuing kittens? But you know, but Kara needs that grounding, and when Kat realized that, I think she allowed herself to be fooled by, you know, the pretend Supergirl, and she throws hints every now and again that she didn't quite buy it. And I think with this new job shift, she pretty much was like, okay, you need to still be here, I get that, but let's give you something that can be flexible. I also think it was interesting that Kara is bumbling it off with, but she's competent. I mean, really, really competent at her job, and as the assistant, which I found kind of interesting, because you don't see that as much in the alternate personalities in a lot of the characters.
So guys, what do we think about Kat? Where is the jury on whether she knows or not? What do we think? We've heard from Dana. What about you guys? Come
Show
on.
of hands. I think she doesn't.
Anyone want to argue a side?
I think I pretty much agree that at some level she knows, and she's choosing not to admit to herself that she knows.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I hadn't thought it through that much, but I like that interpretation that if she doesn't, is she playing a long game where I know who you really are, but okay, I'm going to play along now that I don't, or is it on another level that she's still kind of denying it to herself? That's interesting, because if you take it just at a basic level that was presented, it is kind of bizarre. That you're a Supergirl. No, I'm not. Okay.
Yeah, especially since they painted her as such a savvy character.
Yeah,
You
right,
cannot
yeah.
make her that savvy and be that easily fooled.
Well, easily fooled. She saw Supergirl. Like someone that looked like, oh, there's Supergirl flying. Looks like Supergirl was over there. Okay, maybe I was mistaken. I wouldn't call it easily fooled. You know what it meant to me?
I don't know. I mean, if
Supergirl
Supergirl is
walked
real,
in.
then what else could be real from Kat's perspective? I don't know. That's a tough one for me.
All right, audience. What do you think? Hands up for those who think that Kat knows that Kara's Supergirl.
Ah.
Oh, pretty good.
Okay. All right, hands down, and hands up for those who think she's completely oblivious.
I almost wonder if it's
In the
not like
minority.
a UFO sighting, you know, where she's just trying to rectify it in her own brain, where, you know, okay, I know I saw her, yet I know it's her,
Yeah.
but she can't put those things together in her own head, so
Well, and I
she
think-
goes back and
I
forth.
think there's also ego involved. I mean, she
Sure.
saw Kara and Supergirl in the same room thanks to John. But I think maybe she's like, nobody's clever enough to pull this over on me. It has to be the truth.
No, I think she's looking for the scoop, the next big scoop in the media. She wants to
course.
break the next thing. She's like, I'm going to just hold out here and wait. And the point of being a good journalist is to wait and know when to crack that story.
Do you think that she would, though? I know that often Kat is portrayed as the ultimate journalist, and she's very interested in having that particular power, but we've also seen her get very close to Kara and to Supergirl. Do we think that she would betray that trust?
No.
What do we think?
Not now.
Well,
It depends.
Tonight, she did go on there and say, you need to not trust Supergirl. So I think she's willing to cut away from Supergirl when she needs.
Okay, let's think about some of the other characters. Beforehand, and made a point about James Olsen as a character. What do we make of James and of his relationship with Kara and how that's played out? He's pretty.
It was interesting to see how they were playing up who we used to always call Jimmy Olsen. Now he's James Olsen, right? But this is a very different interpretation of the character in that Jimmy traditionally has always been more like Win Shot on the show, the kind of nervous guy in the office, more gee whiz, Clark, what are we going to do now? And that's more like Win on the show. Now suddenly Jimmy Olsen is the dashing, smooth, cool guy, and it's a very different interpretation. And it's also very interesting that he's in on everybody's secret identity and in the loop, which is very different from traditional DC stories.
I would do two things with that. One, I worked at DC Comics for 20 years.
Yes, oh, I know. You.
And there was an action man period in the 70s where he was a much more dynamic hero.
Yes.
Also, I have to say the original Jimmy while he was a kid. Jimmy was created and introduced on the Adventures of Superman, on the Superman radio show before the Adventures of Superman in 1940. He was created for radio as was Perry White and introduced on it. And that Jimmy while a kid was much more in the Terry Lee, Harry and the Pirates, adventuring. And he was the second lead on the show before Lois Lane, and was a much more adventurous,
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, so he's almost going back to the roots then. Fellow panelists, on James, what do you think?
I think why I wrote to you about him and wanted to discuss him is I feel like through the season, and I mostly know this from this series, he's presented with so many different motives, I don't really know which James Olsen to believe. First we hear he moved from Metropolis because he wanted to get out of Superman's shadow. Oh, but he came on a job for Superman to spy on Superman's cousin. And he wears this watch that can call back. But then a couple episodes later we hear, well, actually he moved from Metropolis because he wanted to get out of a bad relationship with Lucy Lane, who he may still be getting back together with or not. And so I just don't see what his motivation here is, and I feel like it depends on what the writer needs today as to which James Olsen we're seeing.
And that's actually what I was going to say when you said that depends on what the writer needs today. So far, he's more of a plot device than a complex character to me. I mean, he's interesting and he's pretty, but he kind of creates or is a tool of Kat and or Kara and other characters as needed. So when Kat wanted an interview with Supergirl, she demanded that James get that interview, and he felt uncomfortable, and it was so at that point he was kind of again bringing the media into the plot. What are the ethics of asking or demanding almost that James connect the two that way? But yeah, again, I don't see too much in him right now to make kind of a judgment at this point.
So he's basically the bat signal with legs. I actually kind of think he fulfills the role of the damsel in distress. At least as the series has gone on, he has more and more been captured. He is the one that they, at first I think they kind of played around with who was going to be the object of the bad people's wrath. And more, I think kind of starting with the Bizarro Supergirl, when she kidnapped him, suddenly, I think the fans reacted to that. I think the fans liked it because they liked seeing the guy was the one who was captured, and the guy was the one who was trying to reach out in an emotional way, because you don't usually see that. He was the one who was pretty much taking on what has been traditionally a feminine trope of, I'm going to be helpless, I'm going to try to reach this person on an emotional level and stall them until the hero comes and gets me. And I mean, he played it to a T. And so, yeah, I think that they were searching around with what to do with him, and then they discovered, hey, he's really good at getting caught. and in trying to reach the inner depths of the different people, and starts to do that for Kara too, to get her, you know, when she's beating up the car, and you know, he's become the emotional sounding board and also the convenient, you know, distressed captive.
But if you go back to the old 50s Superman TV series, Lois and Jimmy together were both the damsels in distress who
They
get caught and tied up in the chairs every week.
So what do we think of the romantic through lines? We've seen two love triangles, I guess, romantic triangles. We've seen the Wynn, James, Kara. We've seen Lucy, James, and Kara. Well, what do we think about the presence of romantic themes in the show in general, and the way that they've been played out?
I like that forgiveness happens, that they move on, because that you don't see as often. That, you know, Lucy can still work with Supergirl, and and when once he, you know, got over it, you know, he was able to come back into the fold. But you know, I like that because it's realistic. You can have your moments, but you know, the obsession doesn't continue on, and they're adults about it eventually.
I think one of the romantic interests that we don't think about as much, but I thought was pretty important, was Kat's son, actually, because we see Wynn and James all the time, and when Kara kind of rejects him, that puts her relationship with Kat seemingly on the line. But again, Kat, like Dana said, Kat's still able to work with Kara and remain professional. So there's not the romantic interests, and those lines are always there, but they're always barely they're always there throughout the episodes, and they're woven in, but they don't seem to be the primary interest of any episodes or plot lines so far.
I agree for the most part. I think there was the one where Kara kisses James at the end, and then he becomes a zombie.
Like
Other than that, it was a
and
beautiful
everybody
moment.
does.
Yes, as part of everyone becomes a zombie. I would think that if they continue not making it a focus, maybe keeping it there at a low level or not, but it's not really why I'm watching the show, so I don't need those romantic relationships for that show to work for me.
Yeah, this was season 1, so they're hopefully just getting started, and there's always an element of let's kind of plant some seeds here and there, try some things out. Maybe we should go this way, maybe not. Leave things open, and you don't want to commit to a lot of major relationship stuff necessarily in a show like this right out of the gate.
I liked how quickly resolved